Let us begin our chapter. In what year, Einstein asked the history teacher, did the Prussians defeat the French at Waterloo? I don't know, sir. Why don't you know? You've been told it often enough. I must have forgotten. Did you ever try to learn? Asked Mr. Brown. No, sir, Albert replied with his usual unthinking honesty. Why not? I can't see any point in learning dates. One can always look them up in a book. Mr. Brown was speechless for a moment. You amazed me, Einstein, he said at last. Don't you realize that one can always look most things up in a books? That applies to all the facts you learn at school. Yes, sir. Then I suppose you don't see any point in learning facts. Frankly, sir, I don't, said Albert. So here the lesson begins with an account of Albert with his history teacher, where the teacher asked him about the year in which the Prussians defeated the French at Waterloo. The Prussian is a place where Germany and some part of Germany and Austria is. So Einstein was asked to tell the date, and he said that he doesn't remember it. Mr. Brown points out that the reason for this is because he never bothered to learn them. And then Albert justifies, saying that he finds it pointless to remember dates because one can always look them up in a book whenever needed. This answer made Mr. Brown very angry, very upset, and finally he says that tell him similarly, most of the things being taught in a school can be looked up in the books, or there is no point in mugging up facts or learn by heart. And he said, yes, there is no point in learning by hearts. So Albert agrees to that. Then, you don't believe in education at all? Oh yes, sir, I do. I don't think learning facts is education. In that case, said the history teacher with a heavy sarcasm, perhaps you will be kind to us to tell the class the Einstein theory of education. So here teacher concludes that saying that Einstein does not believe in the education which is being given at that time. And Albert clearly replies that he is undoubtedly vested in the idea of education. But according to him, merely digesting facts is not education. So history teacher was moreover angry, and he mocked him, and he asked in front of all the class to tell the entire class what is the ideal education. Albert flushed. I think it's not facts that matter, but ideas, he said. I don't see the point in learning the dates of battles, or even which of the armies killed more men. I would be more interested in learning why those soldiers were trying to kill each other. So the teacher concludes that he should tell the Albert's theory of education, or Einstein theory of education. So Albert flashed out. He says bluntly that facts is not only the matter, but ideas are more important regarding anything from the point of view of learning. So he says that it is no point in learning the dates of battles or even the which army killed how many men. But he wants to know, he is more interested in learning the reason behind the killings that takes place. That's enough. Mr. Brown's eyes were cold and cruel. We don't want a lecture from you, Einstein. You will stay in for an extra period today, although I don't imagine it would do you much good. It won't do the school any good either. You are a disgrace. I don't know why you continue to come. It's not my wish, sir, Albert pointed out. Then you are an ungrateful boy and ought to be ashamed of yourself. I suggest you ask your father to take you away. Now we see here the Mr. Brown got extremely angry and interrupted Albert's speech and punished him to stay for extra classes. Even if he stays for the extra period, there is no good going to happen. That means Albert is not going to change, not going to improve. Neither it is going to be any good to the school. So teacher calls him a disgrace, expressing his displeasure for having him around. Albert mentions that he does not want to be there either. The teacher then remarkably calls him ungrateful boy, and who should be ashamed of and should suggest his father that he should take him away from school. Albert felt miserable when he left school that afternoon. Not that it had been a bad day. Most days were bad now, anyway. But because he had to go back to the hateful place the next morning, he only wished his father would take him away. But there was no point in even asking. He knew what the answer would be. He would have to stay until he had taken his diploma. That afternoon, Albert was very unhappy when he left the school, and it was not that day was bad, but in general, days were getting bad at school, and he hated more and more thinking of going to school every morning. His only wish was that his father would take him away from here to Italy along with him, but he says it is pointless to ask him because he would anyway make him stay here and tell him to complete his diploma or high school certificate. Going back to his lodging did not cheer him up. His father had so little money to spare that Albert had been found a room in one of the poorest quarters of Munich. He did not mind the bad food and lack of comfort, or even the dirt and the squalor, but he hated the atmosphere of slum violence. His landlady beat her children regularly, and every Saturday her husband came drunk and beat her. As I said during the introduction, that is, the story can be understood in different sequences. So this is the second sequence where we find his lodging place, or the place he was staying in Munich. He hated that place because of the constantly violence which is happening there. So neither school was good nor his lodging place was good. He did not give the good lodging place in Munich also because of the poverty his father had. He did not have sufficient money to get the better place than this. He didn't mind a bad food and a discomfort place to stay, but he didn't like the slum violence atmosphere. His landlady used to beat her children regularly, and every weekend when the husband came home drunk, he used to beat the children. His wife.